Thank you very much for another interesting presentation. You exactly kept the time yourself already, so that's very, very nicely done. And when moving to, say, the moderated discussion, I would like to invite the speakers back to the front, and I will set some chairs for you, and then we will ask the audience of the people in the room whether they have questions to you, or want to give responses to what has been said so far. And I hope that will give us a vivid discussion on topics relevant to what sustainable lifestyles relate to social innovation and how that can contribute to transitions. I would like to ask everyone that wants to ask a question to introduce him or herself, or actually mention his or her name and where you're from, just to get a bit acquainted with each other. And I think we can do without the microphone, but it might be needed for the recordings that I just will walk around and hand out the microphone to the one that would like to ask questions. But who would like to say something, give a response, or provide an input to the discussion, or have a question to any of the speakers, or to all of three of them? Yes, please.
Well, thank you very much for your presentations. My name is Adina Dumitru. I'm from the Environmental Policy Group in Avelino University. I hope everybody can hear me. I have a question actually more in general. Thank you. I had a question more in general. Why, I think in all presentations you focus a lot on the government, the role of the government. I'm currently working in a research project which is on the role of facilitators in domestic energy retrofits in the Netherlands. And here I see that they do not, the only thing that they say is policy or government policy, social policy is not moving fast enough, so we're actually going to ignore them. And we're going to do it ourselves. And they are interacting with each other, these kind of initiatives and these kind of facilitators. So I was actually wondering why the government plays such an important, large role in your research, and if you could reflect on that.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's clear.
Yeah.
Who would like to make a start? Yeah, please, you.
Yeah, sorry, I was waiting for the microphone.
Oh.
It's not necessary. Okay. Well, the irony is that actually, no, I think it's fine, right? Yeah, I keep forgetting. The irony is that actually a lot of initiatives had that attitude, started with that attitude, and then at some point you bought a piece of land and you want to start building, and the government says, no, your ways of eco-housing are not allowed. So then there you are with your let's not involve government, and you cannot continue. And this happens to a lot of initiatives also. The Impact Hub tries to work with government, then the government is too slow, so they say, okay, we'll do it ourselves, but then at some point they worked for 1 year building this new building for their co-working space, and then suddenly the local council votes them out of the building again after 1 year. So, and there's nothing they can do. So they are kind of forced to work with government whether they want it or not.
So that means that for the actors that you work with in your research, so that these actors themselves, that they are not like voluntarily want to involve local government or national government, is that?
No, what you often see is that they want to, but then it happens that it's not fast enough, or that it's not a positive. And I'm now really describing a few interactions.
Yeah.
Some of them really work with government very closely, but some of them you often see they start by wanting to involve government. It doesn't work, government moves too slow, so they're like, okay, whatever, we'll do it ourselves. And then after a while they have to again because there's regulations.
And how do the other presenters think about that? Shall I give you?
No, I think I can speak loudly. Hopefully.
That's good.
Yeah, I think Ines can say something more about the initiatives then. But I think in our project also we find that normally initiatives say, well, government is more the source of obstacles than anything else. But then they do have these demands constantly that we would like them to actually facilitate our work, for example, especially in terms of bureaucratic procedures. They are very concerned in the backcasting workshops, for example, about how government sometimes makes it difficult to start these initiatives and to perform their work, to do the kinds of to provide the kinds of services they provide, because of the whole bureaucratic procedures. Another topic of interest was funding. They find it very complicated sometimes to fund their activities without going through the whole thing of all these complicated requests for money to the governments and so on, that they need specialized people for those kinds of demands. Also, I think the other reasons why, at least in GLAMURS, we're interested in seeing what the role of government is, there is a twofold reason. On the one hand, we see that in spite of the fact that these initiatives play an important role in offering a model and also being facilitators in terms of providing services, for example, so providing an alternative, they also have, demand is normally also influenced by other factors, as I was saying before, like, for example, by the drop in energy prices, for example, and then which motivates people on large scales to actually take work longer hours, for example, and then consume more and not be so interested in spending time in other things. And also, and not least important, the fact that we are commissioned by, in a way, by participating in these calls, by the European Commission. The European Commission wants to know what can we do to actually promote these sustainable lifestyles further. So that's why we are also interested in saying something to them. Why is it interesting to do this and not that, and why you should promote this policy and not the other one. Yeah.
And Ines, would you like to add something to
Very shortly, 2 points. One is that the initiatives usually are really diverse, and some really do like to work with governments and get lots of support. At least the 2 Austrian ones would not work without governmental support. So I wouldn't see the role of government always negative, although it might be an obstacle, I agree. And then, as I said before, I mean, Flor, you are the transition expert, but more than me, but we won't come to really a transition that goes into mainstream. And here I really think of a radical change of our systems and the way we live without having people who can make decisions from top business and top government level also on the same boat, I would say. So that sooner or later we would need them, but maybe only later, and I would not see it only negative, but rather positive. Hey, come together, sit in a space like this in a circle and think what we really want and try to make it together. That's what is maybe one of the results from GLAMURS, that we should start thinking of government as friends and not only of enemies, and try to do it together. Although I see sometimes it might be a problem. Okay.
We have some people from the initiatives themselves in the room. If they would like to add to this discussion, then they're very welcome to say something. Is there one of you that would like to say something in addition to what has been said?
Now it's only a small remark to you, but I'm not a hipster, but I'm still a member of the hub. And I think that's what's I have one question, and I'm really making zorgen. I'm afraid that it will go like this, that there will be some crisis. And I'm I'm really thinking about that time and what will happen, how people will react on the crisis if they will understand that it is a crisis that has not a solution immediately, like energy losses or whatever. And what will happen then?
Can you also briefly mention your name?
Sorry, my name is Tinstok,
yeah.
And I'm board member of Repair Café. I would like to say that we have, in 6 years, we have 1,000 repair cafés in 24 countries, and we have a start package in 5 languages. And really, we do nothing more than just say, do it. And there are some colleagues from in front. And it's almost like we invented the research. Because it's really, we thought it would be about environment and ecological goals, and it happened to be a social event.
Okay, thank you very much for this question. How is this a way to approach or handle possible forthcoming crises? What could you say on that?
Well, I think the main
Use the microphone.
yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I think the main concern I would have with that, I think on the one hand we see that we are in a collective process of denial regarding the effects of the crisis. there's been some interesting discourses out there saying that it's not sure when it will happen, whether it will actually happen. There's still this belief, which we look at in GLAMURS actually, on the technological innovation would save us and that there's no reason to worry. So I think we are in a collective process of denial. And also I think the problem is we are going to run into a paradox, which is that by the time, as the crisis is getting more nearer and it's also getting worse, the effects are getting worse, we can also almost predict that already. As we saw also as the results of our survey show, the fact that then it will not be possible to make any change through individual or even collective interventions, that will lead to this learned helplessness or this feeling that there's nothing that can be done, which would also promote further inaction. So this is something that's really difficult to break, and I think one of the important ways to break it is through these initiatives and through the groups in society that are actually taking action already and are actually coordinating to take action at different levels. And also the interest that governments have. I think now governments have much more interest than they used to have, at least because they feel there is a wider demand for these kinds of more pro-environmental or sustainability-oriented policies.
I think there is an interesting social movement. It's called the Black Mountain Project. Has anybody heard of it? It's a social movement that has the slogan, "The end of the world as we know it is not the end, full stop." And they actually really focus on thinking about what if the world as we know it would end, what would a new world look like? And it's like a movement of artists and poets, and they come together and tell stories about what the new world would look like. That's a very extreme case, and some people even think it's quite doomish. But a lot of the networks that we looked at have a bit of that it's about new storytelling, it's about imagining what a new world would look like. And even though you can see it as kind of elitist and alternative, you do see in the past few years that more and more people have heard of it, more and more people have seen it, like repair cafes, you see it on the street. So I think this new storytelling is an important way of being prepared for a crisis. So sounds a bit almost spiritual, but you can also be very down to earth about it. Like imagining a new world is necessary if you want to be able to deal with the end of the current one.
Okay, then are there other questions or remarks or responses? And please mention your name.
Hi, I'm Kaveri. I'm also I'm actually a researcher at TPM, TU Delft. I'm in my third year of my PhD. My question was about whether you've seen any concrete examples of knowledge transfer between one European country to another, because you mentioned in one of your in many of your slides about how it's important that there is more interaction between at the European level. I was just trying to see if you've already seen examples of this, one initiative learning from another in a different country.
Yes, again, with the eco-villages always make for nice examples. There you really see it very strongly, like from how to build a straw bale house, so very concrete eco-housing construction methods, to when you live in a community, how do you deal with conflict? So they have very specific ways that they work with the forum and non-violent communication. And of course these are things that are more generally known, but how do you apply that to living in community? And there you literally see that at the Global Eco-Village Conference, which is every year, that they have sessions where they really share stories. In our eco-village we had a fight about this, how did you deal with this? And they actually really literally transfer methods and approaches. So that's a very obvious example.
Yeah, I think we found examples of that, but there were differences between those networks that are more, those initiatives that are more internationally connected, as Ines was saying in her slides. So they are purposefully connecting to other initiatives, and also there's lots of reasons for exchange, lots of occasions for exchange. And there are the other ones which are not really, sometimes they're not connected, not because they don't want to, but sometimes because of geographical locations and other reasons, and sometimes just because they don't want to. Yeah, there's this idea that they want to keep being on their own. And they don't want to necessarily know so much or exchange so much with the others. Nevertheless, what we did find in the case study exchange is that there was an intensive, and I know some of the people here have been there, there was this intense feeling that there's a lot to be learned from others, and that these exchanges should be promoted on a more regular basis, also at other levels, like by the European Union or the European Commission, which I think it's already done. I mean, the Ecolisa network is one example of that. So big networks that connect different sorts of initiatives that come together for conferences. Degrowth conference is sometimes an occasion for this in part. Also meeting of researchers and initiatives. So I think, yeah, there are plenty of opportunities, I think, out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one story from the case study exchange meeting, I know from the Austrian stakeholders, they were really impressed by the way that people in the Romanian eco-villages live, and took some things back home and explained it to the people there and said we could do this or that, like tiny small things. But what is also a good movement, which we not really analyzed in our project, but is somehow linked to Transit and GLAMURS, is the whole degrowth movement, which is on the one hand a research movement, on the other hand an activist thing in the whole of Europe. And there is summer schools and winter schools and courses going on everywhere where people learn to have a garden again, to plant things, to repair stuff, to use the old skill, the traditional skills again, learn from the older people, the young ones, and apply them again, also something to survive a crisis, for instance, where I believe in the young and the old generations, not so much in our middle one, I have to say. So this degrowth movement, there are lots of initiatives apart, they come and go and learn from each other. So yes, it's going on, and I think GLAMURS and Transit are parts of it, without us being able to really say what happens where, because there's so much happening behind the scenes, at least we hope. Yeah.
And also just what Ines said, it reminded me of another thing, which is that also there's a lot of interaction, especially for example in movements like the Eco-Village, between the initiative and local communities around. So they sometimes learn from the experience that communities already have, and the other way around, let's say more traditional lifestyles, people in the same village or outside of the village, in the city also learn from the initiatives a lot. So this is also an important interaction.
Thank you.
I think it was
Gibran also.
Yeah, okay. I'll get to you next.
Hello, my name is Gibran. I'm also a researcher for the GLAMURS project. I was just thinking right now in your presentation, Ines, for me it was not quite clear that the most important values were the social ones, and at the same time that the people who join an initiative normally had already a lifestyle change before they even shared with others. It's a bit,
strange.
It's a bit contradicting, yeah. And I was just thinking, from your interviews and this kind of work, do you think there's a risk of like creating elites around these topics? And because it's a matter of social identity at the end, and yeah, I'm wondering how have you seen this situation? If there's a risk of creating like this green elite and the rest, the bulk of the population just excluded? I don't know.
Good question. I don't have an answer yet. Maybe a point to look at when we further analyze the interviews or the survey results. But yes, indeed, as you have seen from the slides, the screen and the black figures, at least becoming a member of initiatives might be an elite program and also in the future. And maybe this is not a problem as long as these people are kind of role models and have impacts on others in showing that what they do increases their well-being as well. And in what they do, I do not only mean engaging, because this is not a thing for everybody, but living another lifestyle. And here, we need maybe to implement kind of structures that these people are seen. And they are normal people, it's not like celebrities. They do live differently, and they feel well with it. And if this is then supported by structures, coming from the region, coming from business or also from the government, then it can get from an elite program to another one. But otherwise, I'm also afraid it won't be more than max 15 to 20% of persons who do live differently. But a question we should maybe look into more.
I'd like to support what Ines was saying, also by saying that to explain a bit your first part of the question, so an answer to your first part, which is the social reasons for joining initiatives. So it's not that there's no environmental motivation out there. So it's not that sometimes people don't say, okay, I'll join an energy initiative because I'm interested in sustainable energy. But what we find over and over again on the focus groups and also in the interviews is the fact that what mostly motivates people is finding like-minded others, creating a community where you feel that you can discuss these topics and you can reach, you can make a change, you can make some change happen. Helping others, volunteering for your community, these come out as more important than the environmental reasons. And on the regional level, when we look at the desired lifestyle changes, also these changes are more important than, for example, reducing your consumption, or that is only important as long as you have more time or as you trade off for something that increases your well-being. Yeah, and not necessarily even for motivated people. Yeah, that is the case. So we see that these motivations might be more important. They're not at odds with the other ones, but just if they go together, the case or the change towards sustainable lifestyle choices might be easier and stronger.
So maybe they're not the starting point, but the guarantee to keep on going.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you find a lot of people to do this.
Yeah, that's sort of, it's more sort of that it's the primary motivation. The primary motivation is more social in nature or has to do more with community building and living in relationships that make more sense. Yeah, creating relationships that make more sense, and then or living out the passion. That's also another important reason. Yeah. So, okay. I can go over this.
No. Yeah, and that's helpful to create agency.
Yeah.
If you can add, and then I'll hand, because I think you would like to give a response to this before I move to the next question. Yes.
So maybe regardless whether we think that green elitism is always a problem, because I think there's a lot of elitism out there also not green. So sometimes some green elitism is okay, but to avoid that the only ecological movement is only elitist, I think a very important driver for that are those movements and networks that are explicitly about combining socio-economic inequality with ecological concerns. So Via Campesina, which is a network of farmers, the Global Seed Movement. So there are a lot of movements out there that really relate the ecological concern to the deeply socio-economic concerns, and I think those are very important movements, and that's also about the politicization of these issues. So on the one hand, it's about having fun and community building, and I think it was you that gave a presentation on gezellig burgerschap, and I'm not sure. Yeah, so that's a very important part, but it's more than that. It's also about political activism, so it's not just about, so, and I think that's an important combination, the fun and the community, but also the kind of struggle and contestation.
Okay. Well, the views of the researchers and the experts are important, but after you have shed some light on it, we can get a response from a real practitioner.
Now, from happiness research, I know that connection are the most important things for people. But they have a choice to go to a sporting club or whatever, or to go to church, but they choose for a thing like because they want to make something, because they think things have value even if they are broken down. So the first item is still the ecological item. They want to do something about gardening, they want to do something about repair, but then comes in the social value. And when it doesn't, when that part is not arranged, then you have a very big problem. It won't work.
Yeah.
And then you really need the, how do you call it? The nice.
Gezellig burgerschap.
Then you really need the nice, the gezellige burgerschap as
What is this?
tool.
Yeah, cozy citizenship.
Without that tool, you won't have any
Can't be translated, sorry.
So you need a trigger and you need the gezellig burgerschap.
Yeah, but everyone who has been in an initiative will recognize that. Okay, and from a policy perspective, from a transition perspective, it's also nice because this helps to create agency. So it may also lead to changes. Okay, after having said that, I think I'll move to the last question
Yes,
of this session.
I'm coming back to Ines' nice slides and it was with the green and the brown people, which you could read as maybe green elitarism, but a segregation of people and ideas. If I see your discussion, then okay, the last point, is there an inner change necessary? Well, I could also say, if the social motivations are very important, did you have thoughts about to make more connection between other fun groups, for instance, the local football clubs, religious groups, because those groups have an interest to do something, and maybe, okay, it is not green elitarism, but it is they are already in a local community environment interested to do something in another sector. But because now you are more busy with, let's say, individual changes, so maybe there are also common changes.
I think the question is very clear.
Yeah, just
Shall I
shortly,
start with
maybe.
this one?
Yeah, just shortly. I do think this is easier in rural areas where people are members of different associations, music, churches, you say, sports clubs, and so on, and then also in a sustainability initiative. And here it's always the same people again and again who meet and who usually are also those in power. So yes, in cities, I'm not sure. For instance, Repair Café or Transition Town Halle, this is a group connected to other transition towns or repair cafés internationally, but maybe not so much to other associations in the cities. And here the question would be, would this make sense to connect them more? Who could do it? Facilitators, regional planners, city planners maybe? But I think, yes, it would make sense to bring them together. In the end, maybe they want about the same, not 100%, but about.
Just a small addition, which is that we do look at the intervention at those levels as well, not so much as specific community groups, but for example, when we look at this interaction and we see already from some of the results of the modeling, for example, and also some results of previous research before the GLAMURS project, psychological research, that individual change is not sufficient if it's not supported by, for example, social norms that go in a pro-environmental direction, which can actually overwhelm the effect of personal variables. So we do look at those interactions as well, and I think those level of interventions are actually very important. It's also the levels at which policy can do a lot about.
Yeah, I agree that this is a very important point, and you also see that a lot of local policymakers are very focused on this. For instance, the movement of participatory budgeting, which is much more thinking not so much from a green ecological concerns, but really starting from how citizens can be involved in thinking about how the local budget is being spent. And this can be really about also how does the playground look in my neighborhood? So really bringing it back to very basic things that normal brown people, oh my god, I can't believe I just said that, but in the picture, care about. So I think that's a very important concern for policymakers, city policymakers, and I also think that local governments that are a great opportunity to bring these things together. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, I see on the clock it's already past 3, so I think I would like to close this first part of the afternoon in this session. So I would like to thank you, and I would like to thank all presenters.